Hi everybody, so at this point E3 is now officially over. I had a super heavy week, was busy and out of the house most of the week, so just kind of watching it on nights and catching up, so I didn't get to film anything, and I just wanted to do similar to what I did last year, just talk casually about what I saw that stood out to me this year at E3. I'd love to hear what stood out to you, what really excited you, what maybe disappointed you, because there were several conferences and some game omissions from certain people that I feel like a lot of people were looking forward to. So I'd love to hear some feedback on what you guys thought about E3 and share any videos if you made your own video below. I'll go ahead and watch that. So yeah, just talking in general about what stood out to me, not really what is for the good of the industry in that perspective. I'm not really doing a bullet point, I'm not doing a news thing. You can watch a million of those, IGN, Game Informer, and whatever. But starting with EA, it was a completely unnecessary conference. That was one that I did watch live, and I regret doing it. I wish I could have fast-forwarded through a lot of it, because it wasn't even just one where there wasn't a lot that interested me. There wasn't much of anything. Like, there was no reason for them to even be there, and it was worse because the overall atmosphere of the presentation, too, was also just very dull and uninteresting, because you can even make a fairly lackluster E3 conference seem more exciting the way you actually put on the conference, and as we'll get to later with another company, the way you present your content can also make a conference that's actually half decent seem boring. So it's about the presentation, and here there wasn't a lot to show off, and the presentation was bad, so EA was just terrible. I mean, the most gameplay I feel that they had the entire time was that really horribly, almost offensive Command and Conquer mobile game. That was just disgusting. Like, I can't, garbage. So the whole thing, the only thing that stood out to me at all were actually the two indie games. There were a couple notes here from, as I was watching last week, but Unravel 2, I had not played the first one. This actually looked pretty interesting, though. I really enjoyed the little bit of a gameplay demo they had there. I liked the mechanics there. And Sea of Solitude, that looked pretty interesting. So those two indie games were really the only thing that stood out to me at all at EA. Then moving on to Xbox, I don't own an Xbox One, and I will go ahead and say that despite me giving them a lot of praise right now for this conference, I still am not going to own an Xbox One. I didn't find a reason here to own one, but it was an entertaining conference, and they did show a lot of content, stuff that's exclusive and stuff that was just world premiere that's not exclusive, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But there was just a lot of stuff there, and a lot of stuff that we didn't see much of before this conference. And then you also, of course, have Kingdom Hearts 3, which we saw endlessly at almost every conference, and just, if I was a Kingdom Hearts 3 fan, I would have been so excited this E3, but I'm just not a big fan. My brother loves Kingdom Hearts, so I know he's probably watched all those trailers and loves that, but I'm just not interested. But yeah, Microsoft really showed that they're finally, I think, paying more attention to having a lot of great content on the Xbox, whether it is truly exclusive, which I still think even after this that is a weak area for them, whether it's exclusive or just maybe a slightly better version because it takes advantage of the Xbox One X and or that type of thing. But I think it was also they're future-proofing in a little way. I think now, to me, the overall feeling I got was it's building up to the next Xbox probably coming out in the next 2 to 3 years. I'd say more the 3-year range there, but they seem to have acquired or started a multitude of new studios. They really seem to finally be invested in creating content, not just powerful hardware, and really expanding upon that. But I think it feels much more in preparation for what's coming in the future, and I still think that I would have no interest in getting Xbox One, because I don't feel like there's a lot for that content that system can deliver that I can't get elsewhere, especially just not enough to purchase an entire new console. So a great presentation, but not a lot that excited me personally on that system. Things like the Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition. I have it on the 360. It was cool to see on the Xbox stage, and wow, that's really cool. We get all the content from that Japan exclusive PS3 version. Still wasn't super interested in buying it, just stick with my 360 version. Then we find out, oh wow, it's coming to the Switch. Now I'm buying it, and I think that's a lot of people where a lot of games that I saw at that conference, I was kind of like, that looks pretty cool. I might buy it if it's on the PS4 or the Switch. That was just kind of my feeling there. So I felt like it was a great conference, but just there's no incentive even after seeing a great conference for me to really get into the idea of an Xbox. It wasn't a lot there. And of course they ended with Cyberpunk 2077, CD Projekt Red, and a lot of people are super excited. I'm not super excited. I think more because I think maybe I'll be more excited once we do see the gameplay that was shown at E3 behind closed doors. So I think that is going to be shown eventually to the public, maybe like August, September-ish. I think I heard some rumors about that. Maybe that will get me excited just from what we saw, and I think maybe it was I like the idea of what they're trying to show, that you can do Cyberpunk in a bright daylight area. You know, there will be obviously weather systems and night-day system, whatever. I like that they tried to do that, but I also feel like it gave it a little bit less of a cyberpunky feel to really make its first real showing outside of that little teaser thing years ago to be in that arena. I felt like it should have been more traditionally cyberpunk as a first showing, and then shown how they have done something very creative and really made that sort of cyberpunk style universe exist also in the daytime, which you don't see very often. It looked really cool, but at the same time it's one of those things where just that trailer didn't get me super hyped. It's one of those things where I'm kind of like cautiously optimistic, where it looks really cool, but as far as whether or not it's going to be something that I will enjoy, I kind of need to see it in motion, kind of see like what the real nitty-gritty details of what the game's going to be are like, versus just, you know, I'm not really a person that gets super excited very frequently from something that's just like a little CGI trailer. And there's an exception to this coming up pretty soon, but very rarely does that get me excited without really getting into what the game is. And that's more and more true as time goes on with more modern gaming, where, you know, I keep an eye on games sometimes and wait until a long time after release to decide if I want to buy them, because if something releases and needs a massive day one patch to work properly at all, I'm not touching it. I'm not touching anything where that's a requirement for the game to function. Or say it comes out and there's purposely a lot of content held back for future DLC, and a year down the road there's a complete edition for like 30 bucks. You know, there's a lot of elements of modern gaming that keep me from buying games close to launch. It's not something I do very frequently because of those elements. Even just like fixing little things down the road. I usually wait for modern games, and that's one. That's a good reason why I want to wait to see what's going on there. But it looked cool, a good way to end the show. Then Bethesda was a very fun conference because it had a lighthearted, humorous atmosphere the entire time. It was very enjoyable. And even some self-deprecating humor. I really enjoyed the way they put this together. It felt very entertaining, and almost came with a more of a humble approach than kind of like, you know, I'm the big wig and we're awesome, accept us. You know, it was just kind of like, we're one of you. It just had that feeling to it. It had a friendly feeling to it, and I really enjoyed it. And it was another conference where there was a ton of content. Like, I'm amazed at what's coming out. I mean, you know, something like the Elder Scrolls 6, I think, from what we saw and the fact of, you know, all the different things they're working on right now coming out in the next like year or two, there's no way that's got to be at least like 2 or 3 years out. Like, I really think it's going to be like 2 or 3 years out minimum, if not even further, and it's like a next-gen launch, you know, game. It feels very far away to me. But even that aside, everything else looks very fascinating. They do a lot of creative things. It was definitely one of those conferences where, you know, I love to watch E3 stuff, even say like, you know, Microsoft. I don't own an Xbox. I don't own a very great like gaming PC. The last, you know, game I bought, you know, in retail for PC, the last like actual PC game I bought was like 2003. You know, play on my PC, you know, modern stuff. But I love seeing what's going on in the industry, and I love when other people get excited for games that they love. It doesn't necessarily have to just be things that I love that I get excited for. I get excited for gaming in general and everyone, you know, having a fun time. And Bethesda was one of those things where there's nothing there that really, personally, I'm super interested in, but there's some cool stuff there, and I love the idea behind, you know, Fallout 76. You know, it's not something I would play ever, but I do like the idea. It's very, very interesting and new way to take the game, and hopefully for people that are big Fallout people that are very hardcore into the single player experience, hopefully that is also enough of a focus to find that enjoyment. You know, that'll be my one worry for fans of that series. But yeah, Bethesda was just, it was a fun time, really. I just enjoyed watching it. Square Enix conference. Man, that was a dud. Unless you're into Kingdom Hearts 3, as again, you know, really think that they're pretty impressive games. I played the first one and, you know, watched my brother play the second one, played a tiny bit of it myself. But yeah, not something I'm super into. So other than that, there's really nothing there that excited me about, you know, about the Square conference. Yeah, disappointing. And, you know, I'm more disappointed now after having seen Sony, because there were some Square things I was hoping maybe are just being held off until the Sony conference, and like something with Final Fantasy VII, which with current news and them getting rid of what, close to 2 years worth of work, that's going to be a ways off. But I was hoping to at least see something. I think at this point, with especially all the negative news constantly coming out about Final Fantasy VII Remake, with all that constant negativity, I felt like they needed to have something, even just a tiny something, to really just reassure people, like, it's still coming out, it's still, it's gonna be great, just, even if it's just a false positivity, just like get something there. There's nothing, silence, and just nothing at that conference that excited me. But Ubisoft brought it as usual. They're always one of my favorites. Zero interest in Just Dance, like, at all, absolutely, like, do not want to touch that series. But I have to say, they do have some very entertaining and interesting and quirky openings to the Ubisoft conferences with the Just Dance, like, dance number thing they seem to always be doing. They always have an interesting one, and that conference every year for me is just fun. It's entertaining to watch. There's so much going on that even if I come out and be like, there's really nothing there I really wanted to buy, or I'm looking forward to, it was just kind of a cool, like, fun time, and you get just this interesting atmosphere. So I thought that worked really well. They really went all out showing that Donkey Kong DLC for the Mario & Rabbids game. So that looks like they're really building a fantastic partnership with Nintendo, even more so than they have before, and like Miyamoto being there again, and Star Fox being in that. I call it Spaceship Skylanders. That's looks like such a money suck. I will never touch that game. Building all the physical ships, and like, it's a cool concept, but it looks like one of those, you spend a couple $100s in that game over the course of a year or two before you even know it. But yeah, having Fox McCloud and like the ship and everything in there, they really seem to be partnering pretty closely with Nintendo, and that's really cool. They did show some stuff this year that was interested me, but cautiously, interested me. Things I never would have thought that I'd be interested in before. And Amanda said the same thing too. The Assassin's Creed Odyssey, that's not a series I've ever been into whatsoever. But this one actually has me interested, but I think mainly for the reasons that I feel like a lot of longtime fans of the series probably wouldn't be interested in this. I do feel like it's not the series has changed a lot over the years, but also with this entry, I feel like it's very little of the game seems very assassin-y, It feels like more just straight mercenary, and it seems to be much heavier on the RPG elements, and they focused on that a bit, and I'm curious to see a little bit more of that and see how much heavier it is in those elements and whether I want it. And those are the reasons I feel like maybe a lot of fans aren't going to like this one, but those are the reasons why I actually might be interested in purchasing one for the first time. So we'll have to see how it turns out. Again, it's also a series that comes out so quickly that I'm always afraid of it being a buggy mess when it comes out, and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So it's one that I have on my kind of like my keep an eye on file over there. Another thing at Ubisoft too, the Skull and Bones, which was revealed was last year or the year before originally, and this time we got an interesting look, and it looks very fascinating. But my main concern and why this kind of goes into my keep an eye on file is how in-depth will the actual offline single-player campaign be versus the online multiplayer content? Because it could be one of those, if it's one of those things where it's just a short little, it's basically a tutorial with a story attached and it's mostly about the online, I'm not touching it. But if it can stand on its own as a full-fledged game and be really fascinating and not require the online elements, then I'm pretty interested. It actually looks like a really cool pirate game, and after seeing the comparison of that to the one that Rare came out with recently, like, oh man, it's just the polar opposite from what we've seen so far. It looks like, as far as how you can do a pirate game, this looks pretty good, and I really hope that it turns out to be great. But it's one that definitely I'm going to wait for reviews after it comes out and see what comes out as far as DLC patches, and as far as the single player content, how meaty is that? Because if that is meaty and interesting, this will be one that I would actually be interested in getting. And I'm still very interested in Beyond Good and Evil 2. I know a lot of people are disappointed. It was still mostly just like a CGI trailer. It was felt more like, almost like a movie in a way. We're not getting great looks at gameplay yet. Like, we had some looks at gameplay, but nothing substantial or anything that feels finalized, really. It definitely feels like this game is quite a ways off, but I'm still very interested in what I'm seeing. And again, it's another one of those keep an eye on type games. I feel like this could go either way here. I'm still very excited about it, but it could go either way as far as turning out to be a mess or something extraordinary. I'm hoping it's going to be something extraordinary. So overall, Ubisoft, you know, had a lot of things. It was an entertaining conference. Had a lot of things that I'm curious about and I'm going to be looking out for. Sony, talking about the way you present something is as important as what you're presenting, because after the fact and re-watching bits of the conference then of the next day, you know, with Amanda, I was much more interested in the conference and thought it was a higher quality than when I was actually watching it initially. I was really tired that night and I came home and like I was basically ready for bed, but I said I'm staying up and watching Sony. It's gotta be something there. I was hoping for maybe, you know, just like a hint of Final Fantasy VII remake, or just a brief announcement of like, I just was hoping against hope, and I thought, you know, very unlikely, but hoping against hope that Xenosaga Trilogy would be either at the Nintendo conference for the Switch or coming out maybe on PS4. More likely it's going to be a Switch thing with, you know, Bandai Namco and Monolith Soft, and this seems very Nintendo territory, but maybe because they're originally on PS2, it'll be a PS4 thing. That, you know, didn't come to either conference and might not exist. You know, it was just a hopeful rumor. But yeah, Sony, it wasn't just because what they showed was actually great. If you really look at the list of games that they showed and the amount of gameplay that they showed for these games, they showed off some great stuff and some fantastic gameplay. There's some really cool stuff in that conference, but it started off so slow in that big church tent, and I understand the build-up and making it feel like you're in that element in that part of where they open up with, you know, Last of Us 2, but if you're not physically there at the event, I feel like it was just so underwhelming. You just sit up there and the guy comes out with a banjo, and it wasn't bad in any way. It was just the mood that it started the conference with, the mood that it set was such a not the type of like extraordinary tone that you want, that really great build up, that excitement, that electricity was not there. It was just kind of like, alright, this is a thing, you're going through. It felt kind of dull, you know, I was kind of bored, mostly because it's one of those, it's very much like something that should have been at the PlayStation Experience, I think, because if it's not live, it just doesn't have the same impact in any way. And I've not played The Last of Us, so I didn't know a lot about it, but I've not played it, so I wasn't super interested in this, and I don't have an attachment to Ellie as a character, so I don't know, I just didn't get anything out of it. And that was the other big thing about this conference then, because then after that they moved everyone from the tent to the other room, and it took forever, and I think longer than they thought it would, because then we moved to, looks like a cheap, you know, a pre-show or post-show set, and just rambling on forever and saying nothing. That's pretty much what the presenters were doing there, were just wasting time while they move everyone to the next room. Like, there was nothing interesting said there. I was so bored, and it was like, what, over half an hour then before we actually got to the next thing, and it just kept going like that. Where the other problem is too, they showed a lot of gameplay for these games, and they even said at some point too, like, keep your expectations in check, you know, don't expect any surprises, we're just going to focus on these few games, and that's an okay thing to do, and can turn out to be really great, but you don't say that, and you don't say that in a way that, you know, it was almost like saying, you know, there's not going to be a lot of excitement here, just hold back and hopefully you like what we see. It was a buzzkill, really, and you really go into the rest of the conference with just low expectations, and even when they show something amazing, you're in such a kind of negative mood that it doesn't quite have the excitement that it should have. And again, rewatching some of these things, I was actually more interested, more excited, and saw more that I liked the second time watching it, because the first time I was just, it wasn't a bad mood, but at that point, you know, I was tired and like it just droned on. And with any of these games, with that more in-depth look that they did, which was fun, if you're not interested in a certain game, you had to just sit through 5 to 10 minutes or more of gameplay for some of them, and you know, just one of those things where if you find something you're not interested in, it just kind of slogs on for a while. But there was some cool stuff. You know, the Ghost of Tsushima looks beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and I get a little bit of a Bushido Blade-esque vibe from the combat. Not quite, you know, still not quite to that level. I still think those are the two best fighting games ever, but it had some feelings of that into it, and it seemed interesting, and I think that's another one of those, is kind of keep an eye on type things to really see how the gameplay really pans out, and like how open world it feels, and how that open world is structured, and how the story works into it too. Because with an open world game, I don't like it when it's too loose to where there isn't a strong narrative focus, and then you can also go out and explore. If it's just the exploration without the strong narrative focus, at that point it's too weak, then I might not be interested, but I'm curious about it. Another thing too, the Resident Evil 2 remake and the Spider-Man game, it's another thing that the gameplay looks great, and if you want a Spider-Man game, this looks like this could be the best Spider-Man game ever. It looks fantastic. I just don't really want a Spider-Man game. The Resident Evil 2 remake. Resident Evil 2 is one of my favorite survival horror games. It's probably my favorite in the series, but I don't really know how much I want a remake. I'm very iffy with remakes. I don't always really see the need for them, but I understand the excitement about it, and it actually looks like they're putting a lot into it. It doesn't look like a cheap cash-in on popularity and nostalgia. It actually looks like a bit of a passion project. It looks like a game made, for the fans. Like, it really looks good. I'm kind of at that point still where, like, it looks fantastic, but I'm not so certain I want to put the time and money into experiencing it. How much do I want to play a remake of a game that I enjoy? But you never know, because I actually really like the remake of the first Resident Evil that they did on the GameCube and then ported to the Wii and whatnot. That was really good. I actually like that remake, I think, a bit more than the original game, so who knows? Again, this is another keep an eye on type thing where, like, it looks like a fantastic game, but I'm not 100% certain if I really want it. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of hard to explain, where, like, it looks great, but do I really want it, or just want to replay Resident Evil 2 sometime? I haven't played in years. So that's just kind of in that category. And then, of course, Death Stranding. I haven't tried to look up more about it at all on the side. Maybe more is explained than I realized, but I still am utterly fascinated by this thing because I have no idea what's going on. I have lots of theories in my mind, and I'm sure that people have picked it apart and have probably figured it out somewhere on, like, a Reddit page or something, but just from what we've seen, we keep seeing more and more of it. It's just, like, it's so strange, and I'm very curious. It's probably something I'll never play, but I'm fascinated by figuring out what the heck this thing is. So that was pretty interesting. Overall, the Sony conference, though, again, very underwhelming watching it, but it was rewatching it and re-experiencing it. There's some really cool things in there. And moving on to Nintendo, who, I have very mixed feelings, because as far as the actual E3 presentation, it was a good presentation, but there wasn't a ton for me there, and it was pretty disappointing. But at the same time, knowing the way Nintendo is, it doesn't have the same meaning in many ways as some of the other conferences, especially people like Microsoft and Sony. To me, it's a temporary thing. It's not as big of a deal. I feel like in the next like month or two, we're gonna get something else showing, like a new game, and I feel like, there's probably something like an Animal Crossing in the mix, and we'll find out about it in Direct in like the fall or something like that. I feel like this isn't as much of a blow your load in one moment type event, as it is for many other people. I feel like Nintendo is much more, it's gotten really good at spreading things out throughout the year with announcements. So even though people really wanted to see, and I wanted to see, Metroid Prime 4, I feel like that's going to be something where it's, once the game's further along and further in the year, and after some of the big stuff they're really trying to sell is already out, then we'll see more of that. If there is, a new Star Fox game, we'll find out more after this stuff, because I feel like now there's such a huge focus, obviously, on Smash and on the new Pokemon games. I feel like, and there's so many games coming out almost every month. There's something throughout this year, and I feel like they want to keep the focus on those things and really, really hammer those into people's minds and have you get that. Then they'll show you more stuff instead of showing you like 20 things that are in development that are coming out in the next 24 months. Let's focus on the stuff that's coming out in the next 6 to 9 months, and once those are out, then we'll show you more stuff. So I feel like the actual presentation was a little more disappointing. There was a lot of stuff there I wanted to be there that was not present, but at the same time I wasn't as disappointed, only because I know that it's probably going to be stuff that kind of comes down the pipeline as we move along throughout the year. So yeah, it was pretty much a Smash Direct, and I've never been a huge fan of Smash, with Shulk being in it and everybody being in it pretty much, this being the ultimate Smash edition. We're definitely going to get it, something I'll play with my wife and friends and things like that. Even though I'm not a huge Smash guy, I feel like if I'm going to play one, it's going to be this one. New Fire Emblem looked really good. They had some cool stuff, but not a ton that I was super interested, except that the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 DLC, I am blown away, and especially after the treehouse and showing, of course, they have the cool the challenge mode and things like that, but really getting into Torna, the Golden Country, holy crap, this looks so much bigger and better than I was expecting it to be. I really thought this is where they were going to go with the story DLC, particularly after going through my second playthrough of the game and really getting even more engrossed into side stories of the world. And my favorite part of that whole game, story-wise, was really everyone who's involved in the Aegis War, and really the backstory I was constantly fascinated by, and being able to play, you know, as Laura and Jin and going through that time in history. I actually think story-wise I might end up liking this better than the actual core game if it really is as great as I think it's going to be after more and more information has come out and we've seen more of it, and having, of course, to be able to explore a new Titan and everything and all that's going into it, some new music, changes to the combat system. It feels like practically its own real standalone game, and it kind of is its own standalone prequel. It's kind of, it looks amazing. I really think it's something that I see myself, from what we've seen so far, putting 20, 30 plus hours into this at least. That's pretty much a full RPG. Slightly on the shorter side, but you know, I played plenty in the 20 to 30 hour range that were great. This feels like it's going to be a fascinating journey. In fact, we're getting a retail version. I mean, this looks absolutely incredible. I'm very excited. This definitely surpassed all my expectations of what it was going to be. It looks amazing, and they put so much into this. It looks like they put a lot of work into even updating some of the character models and things. Again, new combat stuff, some new music, a brand new Titan. So much going on. This looks like a full-fledged, you know, game of a smaller scale than the main core Xenoblade. But man, this looks incredible. So that, you know, being a huge fan of that series, that was the thing that stole my heart the most in all of E3. That was the thing that you know, it seems like crazy, just the expansion to an already existing game, but it really is surpassing my expectations already from what we're finding out. And that is the core story that I want to play, and it seems to have a little bit of a darker, almost sadder tone, obviously, because of when it takes place and what's going on. Yeah, I think it's going to be incredible. And again, just the surprise of it being bigger and better, and then what I thought it was going to be, and seeing Shulk and Fiora in the challenge mode, you know, DLC and stuff like that. There's so much coming to this game. I feel like it's the game that keeps on giving and pumps out, you know, countless hours of an experience. So really excited, and really excited to see, you know, what the future of that company is. I was very disappointed at the time to not see any news whatsoever of a export, because I really want to see that, because I would love more people, you know, to be able to experience it to the point where the name gets out there more, the Xeno name, when we get maybe like an X2 or something, or just the series to really flood the Switch and be like the premier RPG series for it. That's what I want. But yeah, I really want that port, and I know a lot of people do. But I don't think the fact that it was not there means in any way that it's not going to happen. Because this DLC, because this expansion for Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is so huge, I think that even if the export is coming in the next 12 months, I feel like we won't hear about it at all until after September, because this is the focus. And again, it's that Nintendo thing where I feel like they're really holding back some stuff that's going to blow people away, because they're releasing stuff out a little bit at a time, and not really, E3 is not as much of a big deal. It's just another direct in many ways, you know, like something we would get in a random January, you know. So I really think that this was more about Smash and really putting that out there and making that the big deal and big seller, and we're going to see more stuff as the year goes on. And I still am holding out hope and really think we're going to see something about the future of you know, Monolith Soft, whether it's first just an export and then something else, or see a new game in the future. I think we'll see something before the end of the year, even if it's something that's a ways off. I think before the end of the year we're going to see what else they're working on behind the scenes. So, you know, overall, E3 in many ways was not quite the crazy excitement that I know we always want every year, but these games take a long time to make. You're not going to have huge surprises constantly, and I think too with the internet and everything like that, we find out about games so long before they come out that you really then also can't have more big reveals and excitement all the time. There can't be surprises every single year, and given that it was still a pretty good E3, I think there were some ups and downs, and some companies were a little more disappointing than others, and Sony had some good stuff to show but didn't show it well. But overall, you know, it was a fun time, and it was a great way every year I look forward to celebrating video games as just a fun platform.